Welcome back to the Empowering Choices Parenting Podcast. We were just trying to decide what to call the title of this, and I told Eric, I said, let's take a drive and hash it out. And I think you like that because that's kind of what we're talking about.
That's the point of the video clip that we're going to watch. And then, we couldn't decide what to call it.
Yeah.
You said that, and Eric said that's the title.
There you go.
So this is a lady, let's see, in the video it has her name, Taylor Heaton, I think. It's a video that she is a woman and a mom who has autism, and she talks a lot about autism things.
Got it.
But there's just a little segment in here. I think the video is good just generally, but then there's a little segment in here where she explicitly says, and this is a good idea for parenting. So we wanted to talk about it. We previewed it before the show, and Eric looked at it and went, she's nuts. So that's the
not exactly what I said.
That's the intro teaser.
Teaser.
So do we just want to throw this video up and then we can start talking about it?
Yep, let's do it. Here we go.
We'll watch Miss
Number
Taylor.
14, have difficult conversations when walking or driving. So caveat here, obviously, be safe, exercise caution, right? Make smart choices. But whenever you are actively engaged in a monotonous task, like walking or driving, it can kind of help us engage with other parts of our brain. This is actually a really good tip for parents too. If you need to have a conversation with your kids that's more serious or important, you can have it with them when you're driving. It's a little bit less intense because you're not looking at them and making eye contact and making them feel, perceived and this pressure to respond. It's a less intense environment where there feels like there's a little bit more freedom to interact in your own format. So consider, having important conversations when you're walking or driving to help you feel a little bit more safe and secure. Be smart.
So we will share the link to that entire video.
Yes.
The name of the video is 25 Autism Accommodations You Didn't Know You Needed. So again, it's explicitly and intended to be for herself. Really.
Right.
She said, I'm a person with autism. I'm a mom with autism. These are things that you maybe hadn't thought about it that might be helpful. But then as she says, I think this is interesting information for parents.
Yeah.
It was something to talk about. And Eric, you had a reaction when you first even heard what she was thinking about. So illuminate us.
Well, yeah, it could go one way or the other way. And it's interesting because, we've both worked with couples in couples therapy. And how many couples do you want to just encourage to get into a deep and sensitive topic that could provide a bit of controversy while driving?
Well, your average police officer doesn't want to pull up on a rolling domestic.
Right, exactly. And the point is, because she's saying, when you're driving, it's just a monotonous thing. And we'll talk about the other part of the monotonous activity here in a minute. But she's saying that because you're not directly looking at each other, it's not going to bring about the intensity, which makes me think she doesn't have teenagers yet, because you don't need eye contact for intensity of feelings. You don't need that. In fact, a lot in marriage therapy, you're saying, hey, don't bring up those touchy topics while you're driving somewhere, because guess what you're going to do at one point or another? You're going to remove your eyes from the road. Mm-hmm. You said a police officer doesn't want to come up on a rolling domestic violence situation.
Yeah, that's a traffic stop coupled with domestic violence.
Exactly. But the other thing is that's how people get in wrecks, is their eyes get off the road, because you're going to be at some point looking at the other person as that intensity might be going up. And if your teenager is in the back seat, or you have a couple of them, that's not the place to go, hey, let's just go for a drive and bring up some ultra sensitive topic.
Yeah, I feel like this is almost the class. I couldn't name a movie, but I feel like I've seen a million movies where they're driving and having some conversation. The kid says something, the parent slams on the brake, and everything, blows out in the car, and they almost hit someone and have a wreck.
Right.
And it's maybe not a great place.
If she's trying to say, listen, there could be, let's talk about what kind of Christmas presents you'd like to have maybe this year, or let's talk about the colleges that you're thinking about. Something that is just you just want to get a little bit of space away and, from the rest of the family, but it's not going to be a deep, touchy, topic. I can understand where a ride in the car could be a good venue. The problem that I've seen with parents is that I have parents saying, hey, my teenager doesn't want to drive with me anywhere. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. You guys seem to have a good bond. And he goes, they'll say, yeah, I thought so too. Oh, what do you do when you drive? Well, I bring up different topics to talk to them about. Oh, I wonder. And they go, yeah, that's why they don't want to drive with me. And that's the thing that she's not thinking about is when you make that the venue, guess what they're going to avoid?
Right.
They're going to avoid it because they don't want to talk about those things. And what kind of way of escape do they have?
Yeah.
Now, and I have known teenagers who have stepped out of rolling cars at 30, 40 miles an hour.
Oof.
And
Don't
so
do that.
she's saying, be safe. I'm going, the safest thing you can do is don't do this.
So I'm going to give this lady a bigger benefit of the doubt. She seems like she has her head screwed on straight when I watched the entire half-an-hour video.
I only got this 1 minute and 40 seconds.
So you are saying that there is a place for her suggestion. Let's talk about the colleges you want to go to. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem like it's a conflictual conversation. She's talking about it reduces the implied need for eye contact, right? So we've talked about in the past about how you can have potentially a better conversation with your kid, maybe with your son, if you're talking and not looking directly at each other, right? I think that's what she's saying. Because her point is she says, well, walking or driving or doing something else. So we've landed really hard on driving and how that can be dangerous. Yes, absolutely. That's her caveat. Be safe, right? And then with so much of this stuff, there is there's a time and a place and an avenue. And if you're having an argument with your kid, you don't want to get into a moving vehicle because that's dangerous. But then there's other you were saying, you just used the example of let's talk about colleges, right? And your kid doesn't want to have a sit down conversation with you at the dining room table while they feel like you're staring at them. So good for some conversations and not for others, maybe.
It really is going to go back to know your kid.
Absolutely. We say that all the time.
What she's talking about is involving more movement. It does different things, in the brain. It does different things for the processing. I totally hear that.
So the driving and or the walking has various movement activities. Yeah.
The driving is going to have some movements, with the hands, but you're
moving
minimal.
Through through the world.
But I mean, it sounds like your main problem with the driving really is, well, first off, the safety aspect, and then second off, just that you're in a confined space and kind of being forced. You're not able to.
So if a child wants to exit the conversation, they can't.
Right.
They're trapped.
Yeah.
And now they're trapped with you, and
then every time you have to get in the car, you're thinking, oh no.
Yep. And they're going to avoid that because all they're going to do in a trapped conversation is count the ways they can get away from it. So they're not really hearing you.
Don't worry, mom. So-and-so's mom's bringing me home. I'm going to walk.
Yeah. No, I've seen that happen. Yeah. And I picked colleges, but there are certain places in this country that's actually going to be a heated conversation because the family has gone to Ole Miss forever and you're not going to UCLA, and we're going to talk about it, not in a car. Don't do that. But you can also get the bilateral processing that occurs with more movement in things like throwing a baseball back and forth, throwing a football, throwing a frisbee. You may have a kid that feels more comfortable. Hey, let's go out and have lunch. Right. And you talk over the lunch table. You can actually tell your kid, listen, I really want to talk to you about these things. How about I take you to lunch? Let's talk about that.
Because the side activity is food, where you're looking at the food and whatever. You're not having to make intense eye contact.
The venue is public, which if the child thinks that things are going to be more intense from your side, the public place can help them feel more safe and secure to be able to talk about it. There are those conversations at times where, it's like, we got to have this conversation. But if it's not one of those few, then how to be able to create that venue is really the piece that I would take away from what this woman is trying to say with each of your kids as to where they can talk best to you and what that looks like.
Well, so she's talking about it, obviously, particularly from I am a person with autism. So that's her like, know your kid. Well, her audience in this video is a person with autism. And then you're saying, well, with your kid, what's going to work best? Do they enjoy maybe you've got a kid who enjoys being in the car, right? And maybe that's a good thing for them. And then you were saying that there's other parents that you've talked to who are like, my kid hates driving with me. So you would have to like connect with that understanding of you and your family and go, oh, that would be the opposite of helpful. Because again, know your kid. We come back to that all the time, right?
Right, exactly. And you're right. That would be that opposite. I've had one kid whose stepmom said that he loved to go do errands with her because that's where he was able to really talk to her. That's the only kid I've ever had. I had another parent who he would take his daughter on walks, and for a long time, that would work really well. Things changed, and it doesn't work that way anymore.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's not going to be the same. I can absolutely envision a person saying, why doesn't it work anymore? It used to work. It was the thing we always did, right? And then things change. They say kids go through phases, right? My goodness, do they, right? I have very young children, and there's sometimes where there's a phase that you look at it and you go, oh, we're just getting used to that, and then it changed. Because sometimes it's like a month or two, depending on what it is.
Yep.
So yeah, that's kind of a difficult thing for as adults. I think we're probably kind of a more stable experience. A lot of our stuff, maybe we kind of got baked in, and then kids' experiences change wildly over the course of their rapid development sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Are there some places that you should work to always protect? And here's kind of my question where I'm going with this. So say, for instance, the family dinner time. Say that you go, hey, we value sitting down, having dinner, having conversation. Would there be a situation where I would go, we're going to have that, but if I know there's hot button topics that are going to be so on edge that they're going to make people whatever, I actually avoid doing that during that dinner time so that my kids always know that dinner is going to be a safe place and a place where we're going to talk about things and maybe whatever, but it's not going to be the place where I bring up so you got an F on your report card. What are you going to do about that as we start, chopping into the brisket or whatever?
We've never seen movies or TV shows where the dinner table like that or worse went bad.
Right.
And if you can't pick up on the sarcasm.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because I think there are many times where I've been at a dinner table and somebody brings something up and I'm like, why did you do that? Why would you do that? Why would you think that was ever going to go well? But somehow in the person's mind, that was the perfect place to bring it up.
Right.
Whether that included, more family members who could, help the person, see the right way or, however
like an intervention.
That was, right? Like a dinner intervention. I like the idea of, now let's keep the dinner table much more of a place where we can just talk about things. And after dinner, then go find your kid and go, let's talk about that F.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what happened at practice. Because just like we've seen in movies, the kids start avoiding dinner.
Right.
And they find very creative ways to be able to do that. Or they just sit in silence for an hour, because they have all the power in a lot of ways. They can tell you exactly what you want to hear.
Right.
Or they can stonewall you.
Yeah.
And you're still not getting anywhere. And if they tell you, what you want to hear, then they're not really engaging with you on the level that you're wanting.
Right. And they are smarter than you think.
Well, yeah, you made them for one.
Right.
Children are frequently smarter than you think.
My 2-year-old surprised me last night when he wasn't wanting to do something. And then I said his favorite toy, which right now is a particular Thomas the Train. And I said, oh, well, then I'm just going to take that with me and that will be mine. And I will take that to my room. He just went over and picked it up, brought it over, handed it to me. And I was
trying to undercut, fine, Dad,
I'm like,
and I'm still not going to do it.
All the leverage I just built, he just took away, and then he's right back to, I'm still not going to do the thing.
Right.
So it's like, okay.
And how did that end?
Not great. Yeah. No.
Not great. Okay. Well, I think that's we are not perfect parents here,
right?
I have yelled at my children.
Yeah.
I've gotten better. I feel very good about myself that I yell at my children less frequently as I have learned to just be like, Well, I mean, I think the thought that I have in my head that helps me is I have to outthink them.
Right.
Because out yelling them is not a
Right.
durable solution.
Yeah.
And yes, we yell at our children. You said it didn't end well. I get it. But yeah, I have to go, There was one time my kid was doing something like what you were talking about, like, and I was thinking to myself going, what's the correct leverage here? And I couldn't come up with anything in the moment. And so I just kept my tongue, I just held it in.
Yeah.
And they eventually like came around. It really wasn't that long. It was probably 20 seconds.
Right.
You know, but I started thinking and going, where can I, and I couldn't think of something.
Yeah.
Because I think it was like, I wanted them to get out of the car.
Right.
And they were not getting out of the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't want to physically like go chase them.
Yeah.
But
So what I'm hearing is you were thinking of what is the correct thing to do, and you inadvertently landed on the tool of silence.
I don't think that was the thing that caused them to like act. I mean,
Sit
maybe.
and wait.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good tool. I don't know if it was like a direct tool. I think it was more like it was a better choice for me to wait, and they kind of came around to it relatively quickly in the scheme of things. I don't know if my silence was motivating to them per se, but I think it was better than the alternative.
Well, and kind of what I'm going for is there are times where just sit and wait. And just, even if, your child, brings that to you, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Because they're looking for what's next to be able to then key off of what's next.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Go from there. And if you don't provide anything but silence and sit and wait, their brain is not as developed as an adult brain by far.
Right.
And so they can't see the big picture.
Yeah.
So they don't know what's next other than, okay, I'll just go do this.
And the more patient you are, that's just going to help.
Oh yeah.
Maybe you'll come up with an intervention that you're like, aha, that one. But yeah, even just the being patient and waiting is a good.
Yeah. And I think different parents obviously struggle with different things. But like I do enjoy that because brushing teeth has always been a struggle at our house. And if my wife does it, she gives up after 3 or 4 minutes, and then usually he's crying, but they get it done. But then sometimes I will spend 10 or 15 minutes, and eventually we'll get there. Yeah, eventually we'll get there. It's a no cry method, but it takes a long time. And sometimes, as we've talked about before, there's not time, whether it be a safety issue or there's times that we just hit a wall where I go, wow, he's so tired. There's no matter what we do, we're just going to be grabbing. And I think that's what happened that night. We were trying to get ready to go to bed, and it's like, well, then I'll take that. And it's like, okay, here we go. We're just going to grab
your intervention was to grab the 2-year-old.
Just going to grab you, and we're going to go to bed. And you can do that with a 2-year-old. I mean, I wouldn't do that as my first thing, but at this point, it was like, we're going to do that. But yeah, I do think that, and I think the same thing comes with back to the table. Some people can exercise that patience of going,
the dinner table.
Now is not the time to bring this up. Let's have an enjoyable dinner. And other people struggle because they just like, man, I'm so burning wanting to talk about that F they got. And you have to, once again, exercise some patience to go, hey, if we want to preserve dinner, have our kids come to dinner, have this be a good time, let's wait until after to have that conversation.
Yeah, you have to assess those things. Is this going to be a good time to be able to do this? Is this going to work out well? Who are we bringing this out in front? What is that going to help with the situation or not help with the situation?
Right. So should you avoid having, say that your pattern, though, is that all those conversations we'll do after dinner, in the living room, on the whatever. Should you try to spice it up a little bit so that they're not going to always go, oh, it's after dinner and Dad wants me to come to the living room?
If they're making efforts to intentionally avoid that, and you're seeing the avoidance become a pattern. Yeah. But then if it's also become a habit where everyone understands that this is the place where it happens and people are engaging with that. I mean, I feel like with a lot of this stuff, like there's no cut and dry, like for every parent, every child, every time you should always, 20 minutes after dinner's finished, you should sit on the couch.
Right.
I think that's our point here is this lady talks about have difficult conversations while you're driving. And it's like, well, you need to think about that.
Right.
What conversation are you having? What kind of emotional escalation does your kid have? Yeah. And then the same as, should we have this conversation after dinner on the couch? It depends.
Right. Yeah.
It really does. You think about those different things. Where does each of your kids, where do they listen better? If you're just going to call a meeting with them, it made me think of old school Italian.
Yeah.
To where dad would be in the bathtub and the curtain would be up. And then the kid that was in trouble would be sent into there to sit on the toilet and hear a lecture from dad and talk about.
That was a different time.
The word
it was a different time.
When you said lecture, that was what made me think that was probably not effective.
To anyone that I know that ever went through it, not really.
Right.
Because the one thing they took away is I don't ever want to be in the bathroom with dad when he's in the tub. Mm-hmm. They didn't absorb a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And so, it's picking where you think, that your kid is going to be able to engage with you over a topic or a conversation. Mm-hmm. A lot of the sitcoms that we've had that have gone up over the last decades, you see a parent going to a child's room, and the parent just has the kind of countenance to where the kid's like, yeah, I figured you were coming by. And the parent's like, really? The F, the F really got that through that I would be coming by your room? Yeah. Why didn't you come talk to me sooner? And then it begins to go in that kind of a threaded way. Where I've seen other times where, a parent, a dad might take a kid, a boy or girl, out to shoot hoops, because that was a favorite activity. And that brings about more of the brain involvement that she's talking about. Any of these things can go badly at any time. And at least the child has the ability to, especially as a teenager, to end the conversation and walk away on their own power. You don't have that in a car, And so, although, like I said, I have known kids who have still exited the car. And that's just it's not the place where I want to have those kinds of conversations. And I've seen a lot of kids who just say, done being in the car with you.
Yeah.
Yep. Definitely pay attention to that. And then I think our broader point here is like, we're brainstorming ideas and maybe some of these connect with you. Maybe these could like, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. And that's our point. And then to think about your relationship with your kid, to pay attention to your kid, what's going to work for them, and maybe consider something you hadn't tried before and then see how it works.
Totally. So yeah, those are some good strategies and things I think we've talked about. That was kind of a fun video to kick that off. So definitely let us know in the comments sort of what you think and what you've done and what's worked for you. And maybe if you've been a part of some of these dinners or car drives gone wrong, you may have a story to share. And then subscribe and like, and we will see you on our next episode.